And today I've been going to be talking all about treatment options. So you heard from Ham and learned about the biology and sort of what makes this such a big issue. And you heard from Ariel and heard about how to test and understand the importance of testing. And now I'm going to kind of bring it all together and give you my recipes for treatment. And I will say there are a lot of ways to skin this cat in terms of there are a lot of different methods as Ariel had mentioned. But one of the things that I think is sometimes it's not helpful when people just present you with lots of options. I'm going to narrow it down and give you specific recipes. And these are things that for me are tried and true recipes. I'm not going to recommend anything that I haven't tried or I haven't explored pretty explicitly. So we'll go over that here. But one of the most important things is that you do something. And that is really a big deal for me. I will say I started out as a treatment-free beekeeper and it didn't go so well, y'all. And I'm here to report that, you know, as an organic farmer, I really had to learn the hard way that it's not the same. And this is a totally different discipline of understanding about this creature. And when we really look at what we can do as beekeepers to be in reciprocity with our bees, the least we can do is sort of is intervene in this issue where bees essentially have no way to sort of evolve past this. And I do kind of take offense when people, oh, this is the battery dying maybe?
I don't think so.
I didn't press it though. When people kind of say they don't do nothing and then they call it something, and I'm like, that's not, you know, it's this idea of like, oh, well, I don't do that. I'm letting nature take its course. Well, you already diverted from nature when you put bees in a wooden box. So let's just be real. Let's go into some of our options. One of the coolest things about this topic though, and this is something that I learned, here's the good news, is that actually when we talk about organic farming and we talk about organic methods, often usually we're making some sort of a sacrifice when we use organic, where we're gonna have to treat so many more times, we're gonna have to get in there with some cultural practices to IPM and things like that to get the efficacy level up to where it really makes sense. Where in this specific issue, our organic treatments have incredible efficacy. And in fact, not only are our organic treatments have such good efficacy and how good they work, but they don't create resistance, where all the other chemical treatments tend to create a resistance in the bees themselves. And so the more you use them, the less they work. The organic treatments have not been found to cause that. And they don't leave residue in the wax or the honey. And so this is a really beautiful aspect of the fact that in beekeeping and in mite treatment for bees, the organic methods are actually coming out way on top. Sorry, microphone check over here. But we're going to talk about one of the ones that, especially if you're just starting out and you've only got a couple of hives, this may want to be kind of the go-to for most people. And this is the formic acid strips. And it's the only treatment that penetrates the brood cell caps, eliminating mites in the cells where they reproduce. And as Ariel and Ham just both pointed out, a huge amount of the population of mites in a given hive are going to be breeding under the caps. So you're not going to really be able to do any cultural practices to sort of get them out. And so this is a really important part of why it's such an incredibly difficult onion to sort of deal with mite populations when they get so high, is that so much of the mite population is happening under the brood caps. So formic acid does a great thing in that it's kind of a one and done treatment, in that you put it on and it penetrates the whole hive, it penetrates under the brood caps, and it kills a large amount of the mite population all at once. So that's one of the benefits it has. It is also, another benefit is that formic acid is naturally occurring in the hive. It is the chemical component of the sting. So the property of the sting, it's a naturally occurring venom kind of medicine in nature. It's the component that is in a nettle sting when you get stung by nettles.
We're working on a new mic for you.
Oh, okay, yeah, I don't know what's going on. Oh, thanks. And it's also like when you squish an ant and you smell that smell, that's also formic acid. And even snake venom is formic acid. And there's thousands of plants that have formic acid, as well as the other kind of sort of plant version, which is the oxalic acid that we'll talk about later. But these things are naturally occurring in the hive already. And this is kind of an important topic because when we're talking about mite treatment in general, it's kind of this quintessential issue of how do you kill a bug on a bug, so to speak. It's really tricky, right? And these things are already in the hive. It's also the only treatment that's labeled safe to use while the super's on. And you know what, I think I'm wrong on this. This is kind of an, I made this a couple of years ago. Now that they have Varroxin, the oxalic acid strips, those also can be used with the supers on. But prior to the Varroxin, which has just been out, I think only like about 18 months or something, formic acid was the only treatment that didn't, that could be used while the super's on. And that being said, this is not considered a good practice. Pretty much none of us that are really into this in any deep way use treatments when the supers are on. So, but it's just kind of to show you that the residue is not penetrating the honey. They're not going to be able to look at your honey and do a dissection on your honey and say, yeah, you've been using this treatment, that treatment. So just to kind of dispel those myths that if you treat your bees that your honey's tainted, that's not true with these organic acids. But it also has some problems, formic acid, and one of the most glaring issues that it has a very sensitive heat index. And the issue is that the time that we need to use formic acid the most is right about now and 2 weeks ago, right? So when you pull that supers off and you are getting ready to do your mite treatment in August, you need there to be temperatures below 85 degrees in the first 3 days of treatment. And so try finding 3 days in August that are below 85. It can be really, really tricky. Not to mention you're taking a hive that's been in a skyscraper and you've put your skateboard on, or you've done your fume board, or whatever you do to move your bees, and you've squished an entire skyscraper worth of bees down into 2 brood boxes, and then you throw on a mite treatment that has a high heat index. That's when you talk about over-treating or something like that. Those are the kind of circumstances that create sort of an over-treating situation where you have a hive that's super packed with bees, and then you throw a mite treatment on when it's too hot, and you essentially create a dynamic within the hive that is sort of toxic for the bees. And that's more about the circumstantial way in which you apply the treatment and less about the treatment itself. So essentially the main goal for us when using formic acid is to seek out days that you're going to have 3 days where it's under 85 degrees. And I don't even mess around with in the 80s. Like, the best time you could have done this treatment was last week when we had that week of 70s, right? That was a great time, and in fact all of us were like scrambling all around. We're like, we don't care how much we have to pay, we want that formic acid. And part of the reason why is you get that one and done really big treatment. And I will say I had 2 beekeepers send me their pictures of their mite board, and I wanted to get them up on here, but I couldn't get them from my phone onto the laptop to show you. But these mite boards would have made any of you puke. And I'm just saying, it was literally, and these are the people that sent them to me. Of all my 20 students, they had the 3 best hives that I watched all summer long. These hives were rocking. I mean, they produced several hundred pounds off of 3 hives. And so the ones, this is the tricky part, is the hives that are doing the best are also the first to fall because of the mites populating under the brood. The higher the brood count is, the higher the mite count goes. And so this is the tricky thing, is it's those hives that are cooking and rocking that are gonna have the worst drops and the biggest mite infestations. So when she looked at those mite boards and saw just layers of mites all on the mite boards, she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did formic acid versus one of these other treatments that takes a lot longer to get the full treatment done. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the main thing is you want to put these impregnated strips in the center of your brood configuration. So depending on what brood configuration you're using, either 2 deeps or 3 mediums or 2 mediums, or a deep and a medium, the places where you have the most brood density, that's where you want to lay the strip. And I will tell you, in all my years of doing this, I've never used 2 strips at once like this. Nancy's husband Ken taught me years ago to do they give you 2 options. Do the 1 strip across and then wait 10 days. And then after 10 days, if you're still getting high mite counts, you can apply another single strip. And it's a lot less traumatic on the bees. You're in the middle of robbing season. It's a much better situation than putting 2 pads on at once and hoping for the best. So I generally have never even needed to apply the 2nd pad. The 1 pad works great. And the main thing with this and all the treatments I'm going to talk about today is timing. It doesn't matter if you treat, it matters when you treat it. And this is why it's so important, as Ham I'm sure spoke to, was when the fat bees are being made. And here's a really good indicator. If you want to know when the fat bees are being made, look outside, and when you start seeing the leaves change color, that's the same dynamic that initiates in the bees to start laying the fat bees. So when the temperatures at night start cooling enough that the leaves start changing colors, that's a really good indicator that those fat bees are just around the corner being laid, because it's those same cooling temperatures that initiates in the queen to start laying the fat bees. And if you have super high mite populations when the fat bees are being made, it doesn't matter what treatment you use, because those bees are going to be adversely impacted by the level of the mite load. And they just will not live as long as all the other bees, and that's why the hives die over winter, is because they age out before the end of the season. So it's really important that you just nail the timing with this. And hey, we're all trying our best. It's hard, but it's really easy. I know me, I've got great beekeeping energy all during the spring, all the way to summer solstice. And then this time of year, it's super hot. The bees are a lot more testy and they're boiling out of the boxes. The boxes are so heavy. And I'm just like, I don't want to go out there and do all this stuff right now. So it's really easy to lose your steam this time of year. But I will tell you, this is actually one of the more crucial times, because you know what? If your bees swarm, you'll probably be okay. They'll probably make it in the spring. But if you forget to do your treatment this time of year, or you wait too long to do it, it's donezo. You gotta do the timing. You've gotta hit the timing on this. So really, really important. So again, the formic acid rules, only used when it doesn't exceed 85 degrees in the first 3 days of treatment. And if for some reason you throw the box on, it's like around 80 and all of a sudden the weather changes and you've got like 83 or 84 and you're just seeing big time bearding and all that, you can go and give them an extra super to throw it on top to give them a little more room, or you can go and ventilate the top of the hive. So not all is lost, and you definitely want to take one of those measures. But you also need to look at the minimum, because if it's under 50 degrees, and I've had that happen in the spring when I've used it, where all of a sudden it gets really low temperature, and it's like the pad doesn't really get, what's the word? Like it, yes, it doesn't like disseminate through the hive or whatever. So you just kind of got to make sure that you have it at a minimum of 50. And then I like to just kind of keep 80 degrees as my top notch there. It does require all entrances to be open, and you are able to vent the lid. But you do need the bottom board in. So you've got to have your, if you have a screen bottom board, you want to have the mite board in. And you really don't want to use this on colonies with less than 6 frames of bees. So if you've got a weak colony and it's just deteriorated down and you've got less than 6 frames of bees, this kind of isn't the best. And I want to just push it out there that probably not too many treatments are going to help too much with that. Because this time of year, if you've got less than 6 frames of bees, that's a pretty weak colony. Now, if you were in the spring and you were starting something out, you had made a split, that's a totally different story than 6 frames of bees this time of year. And sometimes it usually doesn't kill a colony outright, but if the colony is super infested and has a high virus, those are the colonies that are most susceptible to to being harmed by this treatment at the upper end of the heat index. The next treatment that we have is oxalic acid, and oxalic acid can be applied in a number of ways, so it makes it a pretty diverse treatment. I heard you mention about the worry hives. This is one of the main ways that we would treat the worry hive is through oxalic acid dribble, and that's I have worry hives and have mentored lots of people with worries, and this treatment works really, really well in a worry hive because you're just sort of dribbling it over the cluster. But essentially you're kind of using around 35 grams of oxalic acid powder, and it basically works out, you kind of add that to 1-to-1 sugar syrup, so 1 liter to 35 grams, and you stir until it dissolves, and then you draw it into a syringe and you disperse it in the seams of the bees, so like directly onto the bees when...
You have a good voice, you might go down.
That's what I was thinking. Can you guys hear me enough? Okay. I'm just going to rock with that because this is annoying. And, oh, that's oxalic acid. Probably shouldn't put that there. Okay. And so you just go right and dispense right into the seam where all the bees are coming up through the seam. You just dispense right into the seam as you go. And you know what? This isn't my favorite treatment, I'll just say. This works the best if you have like a worry hive or a top bar hive where some of the other treatments aren't going to be as feasible. So this is kind of just one way that you can use it. The main way that most of us are using the oxalic acid vapor is through the vaporization method. The one main kind of downgrade of downsize to this one is essentially it doesn't penetrate the brood caps, so it has to be used more than one time. So in terms of the oxalic acid vaporization, it is essentially we're using 1 to 4 grams of OA per brood box. Now, the label suggests to only use 1 gram of oxalic acid per brood box, and we are bound to use the labels the way that they're intended, so that's what we have to tell you. But what I will say is Dr. Ramesh Sajili just did a huge study on this, and he's found that actually closer to 4 grams of OA per brood box has a much better efficacy rate and wasn't shown to create high mortality in the brood. So we may think about that, and they're in the process of trying to change some of the labeling about that. But the main thing is that where formic acid, you can put the pad on, you wait 14 days, and it's done the whole treatment. With oxalic acid, it doesn't penetrate the brood caps. So you have to treat once a week for 4 weeks so that you're essentially getting every hatch. So if you miss one, you could really lose some efficacy on your treatment if all of a sudden you get busy and 2 weeks in, you can't do the 3rd treatment. It's not that you have to start all the way over again, it's just you start to lose efficacy. And that's because those ones that made it through have phoretic mites on them, and they're going to, jump right back into the brood. So we really want to think about this in terms of it's a more time consuming. And this is the biggest downfall on it, is that it's more time consuming. Once a week for 4 weeks, you've got to treat these hives in order to get a full application. So you do a single treatment, it's really not going to do much because, again, more mites are just going to hatch next week. So, that being said, in winter, it works really good as a one-time treatment. So we can treat with oxalic acid between Thanksgiving and Christmas in the broodless phase, and we do one single vaporization treatment then, and you'll get all the remaining phoretic mites in the hive, and that's a really good treatment to do right going into winter to really get those phrecs. And that doesn't matter what other treatment you use. There's other people that can apply this, so if you don't have a vaporizing gun, get with somebody that has one and see if they can help you with this, because this treatment really does a lot to help people overwinter better. But the big benefit of oxalic acid is that it has no heat index. So you can use it in cold conditions, you can use it in really hot conditions. So this tends to be for big beekeepers that have more than one hive. We tend to kind of lean into oxalic acid is because we know if we wait until that cool day of 3 days under 80, we may get our mite populations up too high that it's too hard to bring it back down later. So for us, we're going to want to get out ahead of it. So even if we're planning to use formic acid, we may use this treatment once a week until those treatments are able to be applied when the temperatures cool down. And that's just because the timing is more important than what you use, again, to protect those winter fat bees that are being made. And there's another method. I think, why don't you show both methods real quick? We have two methods of applying oxalic acid vapor. The first method that probably is more realistic that people have access to is this oxalic acid vaporizing wand. And these are quite affordable on Amazon and Man Lake and other things. The thing with this one is it has this little kind of compartment here. You put the oxalic acid in, dose it in here, and then you slip this in the entrance of the hive. And Norm's done a great job to outfit his. Not all of them have this nice little thing that Norm has done.
Usually you have to switch to it.
Usually you have to unplug it and plug it off, so it's kind of a pain in the butt. But it takes, how long does that one take to do?
Well, it takes several minutes for it to heat up.
Right.
Okay, and then you probably want to leave it in there for 2 to 3 minutes at least to fully vaporize. Then you have to wait for it to cool down before you put it in the next hive.
And then you have to heat it up again. So, it takes quite a long time because you're heating, cooling in between each hive. It does still work really good. The main problem I have with it isn't any of that. It's just that this gets up to a couple hundred degrees and you're literally putting it in a candle box. And you're just and I've gone in hives where you pull the bottom boards and the bottom frames and the wax is all melted on the bottom. And it's oh, you used an oxalic acid one, huh? And they're yeah. It's I can tell. And that's why.
This one does work off a car battery.
Yeah.
Okay, there are some other possibilities. You could use a transformer or something.
Right.
Yeah, it works off DC, car battery.
Mm-hmm. I use, when I had one like that, I used a lawnmower and I just got an inverter from Harbor Freight and I used it that way. The next method is it's called the Speedy Vap. A member of the club, Brian Jackson, makes these. He's Honey Paddle Farm. And he took this gadget that was $600 that only commercial beekeepers had. And he was able to 3D print it, and he's an electrician by trade, make this really affordable gun. These retail for about $190 or something like that. But the real thing with this is that the heating element doesn't ever go in the hive. So you drill a little hole, this little piece goes in, you have a little suction that goes on the top, and you fill the suction cup, you set it up on top of the hive, you dose it out, you pick it up upside down like that, and then you put it into the thing and tap it down, and it basically steams out the hive. Now the cool thing about this is it doesn't need to heat up, it stays instantly hot, and it vaporizes in about 30 to 40 seconds. So it's really quick. So if you have a lot of hives, you can just boom, 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 go right down the line, and it's much quicker than the other method.
But this one does work off regular house current, 120 volt.
Yes.
So you either have to have a really long extension cord or you have to have some kind of an inverter attached to a battery
yes.
that would give you the 120 volts.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
What was the name of
His name, Speedy Vap by Brian Jackson of Honey Paddle Farms.
There's others online, but they're usually more expensive.
Huh? Doesn't he usually have an ad in the newsletter?
I think he does have an ad. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, an ad in the newsletter, for sure.
I was looking at Speedy Map, and I couldn't find anything about it.
Oh, okay, good. Thanks for letting us know. Yeah, so in the back of the newsletter, there's something, and if you can't get a hold of him, definitely email one of us and we'll get you his info. Because the thing about this is we don't do a lot of product touting and all this stuff, but I have to say, you can't find anything cheaper that does the trick like this. So the product is just so good and so affordable that it's really nice to be able to, yeah, and it's local. So there you go. There is another method that's gained a lot of popularity recently. This was made popular by Randy Oliver of Scientific Beekeeping. This is the oxalic acid in glycerin on the shop towel method, and you essentially make your own impregnated pads with shop towels. This actually isn't the best picture. You can see how they're laid across. They don't work as good like that. They work better when you stick them down between the frames. That being said, I've had a couple students who insisted on using this, and they had really insane mite populations always. So I personally don't think it's the greatest method to really control the mites, and I just will throw that out there. However, some people think it does work. You apply them between the frames, and you essentially put new ones on every 2 weeks for a month. So that's kind of the method. And it's 12 grams of oxalic acid, 10 milliliters of water, and 13 milliliters of glycerin is the recipe. They came out with this new product about 18 months ago, came onto the market. This is known as Varroxin oxalic acid strips. They look like this. They come in a little strip thing. They are time released over 60 days, and the dosage is dependent on frames covered with bees. So essentially, if you're using double deeps, you need 1 strip for every 2 frames of bees in each box. So you'd put probably 4 on the bottom and maybe 2 in the top box would be a complete treatment. If you were using mediums, they recommend only 1 strip for 5 frames of bees in each box. I think I wrote 5 frames of brood, but it's actually bees. There is no heat index for using this product. Now, that being said, I use this a lot. We got these in our nukes, and I got some, and I experimented with a bunch of my students using this. I found it was a wonderful spring treatment. It doesn't leave any residue in the honey or the wax or anything. So we kept these on for 60 days in the spring, and I found that I had pretty record low numbers of mite drop all through the early part of the season. Now, that being said, there was never a time that there was a big mite drop. And I will say that's the kind of efficacy we're looking forward to this time of year. We want to interrupt the mite population and the Varroa population in a really big way this time of year. So personally, if my intuition tells me this isn't the best treatment to use this time of year, because you're not going to get quite the same big mite drop and relief from the mite pressure that we're really looking forward to this time of year. But I think it's a really good treatment for the spring and using in the early spring. So I think the sort of jury's still out on this one, and because we're all just kind of experimenting with it for the first time, and it's kind of anecdotal, but I like what I'm seeing with it, and I'm interested in kind of checking out more what it has to offer. However, I will not be as easy as it would be to throw these pads in and say 60 days later I'm good. I'm personally not betting the farm on this treatment going into winter, and that's just me personally. But there's also other less desirable options that you may be hearing about. One is Thymol, and I just want to cover this really quickly because often people will opt for this treatment thinking they're getting a more organic treatment or a more natural treatment. And in reality, Thymol is actually not an organic treatment. We are lucky in Eugene to be home of OMRI. If you guys don't know what OMRI is the Organic Materials Review Institute. And their entire job is to basically review all the materials in agriculture that can be used on certified organic agriculture. And so their whole job is to decide if this thing is going to create a residue or create a toxic something that is going to be left into the food that we eat. And the Organic Materials Review List has done extensive study on miticides. And although honey cannot be certified organic in the US, the OMRI list pertains to the entire globe in terms of that is the materials review list that is used to determine organic agriculture all over the globe. And they have not found this treatment to be organic. It leaves residue in both the honey and the wax, and as well as the bees are testing for resistance, which means the more you use this treatment, the less efficacy you get with it. That being said, I will say, in really hot climates, before Varroxin was available, like my sister lives in Chico, California, try finding a day that is under 80 degrees till November, right? So a lot of the beekeepers use this here as kind of a stopgap measure to get them through to the time when they can use formic acid. And so I haven't used it a lot in that way, but a lot of those beekeepers down south swear by it in that way, which is great. Personally, we have great methods with the organic acids, the oxalic acid and the formic acid, and so I don't find the need to go here with this treatment. I do a lot of mentoring. I have 15 students, and they live in very diverse climates and very diverse circumstances, and I do know that they have less over winter success, the people that solely go in on this treatment. So in my opinion, the fact that it's not able to be organic, it leaves residue, it creates mite resistance, all these things make it a less desirable option for me personally. And the bond method, the live and let die, treatment-free method. And I gotta go into this one a little hard because this is kind of, as I mentioned, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine, where someone will literally come to my booth at the farmer's market and they'll literally tell me about how they're more organic than me. And I'm like, okay, so you let your bees die and you are now like you are the moral high ground of beekeeping because you let your bees die a painful death. Like, I don't get it. And for me, I will say the deeper you go into this and you recognize what these bees have to suffer with, when you see your mite drop on those boards and you're like, oh yeah, I was just gonna expect my bees to like evolve through it. It's like very intense to believe that you're doing them any favors. And evolution takes thousands and thousands of years. That being said, this happens. There are people that are so committed to this that year after year, they work on, basically, they don't do treatment, and whatever bees live, they basically queen rear or make splits and divides, and they encourage those. Then they run them for a year, whatever ones die, they do it again, and they keep doing this until they get resilient genes. And then they may have a certain amount of hives that have this more mite trait into it. So you can do that, and there may be, I know people, there's Kirk Webster, he's got a pretty large apiary and he's been doing it for a long time. There are people that do this, and I don't want to knock the fact that it's not that it's not possible, but in order to get there, the numbers we're talking is like, if you is not doing 1 and 2 hives. It's like someone that's literally putting out 50 hives and they know 90% of them are gonna die. And then they take that 10% and then they rear those and split those off and do it again, and then they lose 90%. So if you're willing to like go through that and take that journey, then do it, But I will just say, it's hard for me to believe that you're holding the moral high ground there, because I've seen firsthand what that looks like, and it looks like suffering to me. Just want to throw this out there. The other thing is that I'm not a big, huge believer in the mite bomb thing, because I do have lots of neighbors who refuse to treat, and I don't feel that my bees are adversely affected because I keep my bees strong, and those drones and those mite-ridden bees aren't really affecting my bees. That being said, though, if you're someone who is totally dedicated to treatment-free and you live in a high-density area where there's lots of other beekeepers, what you have to understand is the drones fly freely between all the hives, and so in those situations, you are vectoring mites to your community. So it's kind of irresponsible. And again, I'm not going to go into the chemical treatments. There's a ton of chemical treatments. But here's the deal on the chemical treatments. The efficacy is not better than the organic treatments. They're not. It's not. The other thing is there's a huge risk of contamination in the environment, a risk of contamination to your own health. And truth be told, the people that have created these treatments and the companies and all this stuff for me is not something I want to support. So I'm going to leave that to you all to, if you want to use one of the more chemical treatments, by all means, there's so much information online. A really good organization is the Honeybee Health Coalition, and they have all the mite treatments out there and you can see, but I just leave that up to you to do your own research, because in my opinion, we have so many wonderful treatments that are organic and don't adversely impact the environment and our own personal health, that I just don't see a reason to kind of go there. So I'll let you look into that yourself. But again, I just want to lean into the fact that timing is everything. So many people come to me and they're like, hey, you know, I don't know what happened. Like, my bees died. It's like I did the treatment, and really it's not about, you know, if you treat, it's when. And so just kind of throwing this out real quick. When we hit this peak of nectar at summer solstice, just like it took our bees 3 months to build up, it takes 3 months to back down from the peak population. And it's during this time that we are in the decrease phase, where the queen slowly but surely starts laying less and less, that mite population skyrockets. Well, that might not even be such an issue if you had a really strong population, but what happens often is people wait too long to remove their supers. So here's the first error they make, is they leave the supers on too long because they're thinking they're going to get that late season honey. Well, this causes a sort of cataclysm of issues where your timing goes off. So your first issue is you leave the supers on too long. In my opinion, I don't care where you live, you have to have your supers off by the 3rd week of August. Because if you wait any longer, 2 things happen. One is the bees start to believe they're getting that honey on the top. So rather than the bees condensing back down into the bottom box and backfilling the top box with honey, they shrink the bottom box and they start putting tons of pollen in the bottom, and they shrink up so they can get to this honey up here. And so then that puts you in a position where you have to rebalance the whole hive to get it back to where the brood's on the bottom and the honey is all on the top. And if you wait too long, you could actually starve them, where you put you in a position where you have to feed a whole bunch, because now you've taken that super off, they've abandoned the bottom box and you haven't looked in there, and all you've got is the middle box, the top brood box, that has a little bit of honey and some brood in it. And this is what I see new beekeepers do year after year. So this time of year, we pull the supers off and we get as much of the brood down into the bottom box, and that top brood box creating an open brood space so that they can either backfill the top with honey or drawn comb, where they can put that honey that they're going to get for the rest of the year. But they need the rest of the season to put the nectar in. And if you've not given them enough, or they don't have enough, you're going to have to feed in order to get them up to weight, because they need 1 frame of brood. For every 1 frame of brood, they need 1 frame of honey. So you got to kind of work on that. The other thing is that if you leave your supers on too long, you won't get your mite treatment on in time. And this has happened many times, where we get an early freeze in September, and there's nothing like an early freeze to throw the queen right into a position where she wants to go into that fat bee territory. So essentially what happens is, when those fat bees are laid, it's already too late. If the mite population is super high, so you really can't bet the farm, because you don't know when it's going to be that those first really cold night comes in. And if you just kind of bet that you're going to be able to treat those mites, and then what happens? It's too hot to put formic, so you can't do a one and done. Then you're pinholed into using oxalic acid, and oxalic acid is great, but it takes 4 full weeks to get the full treatment done. So then add a whole nother month. They don't have full release from the mite pressure for another month after that. So this is why it's just one little hitch in your gig kind of throws the whole thing off, and then your timing is off. And then it kind of almost doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, still treat, but at the end of the day, you're not going to have the good efficacy and overwinter rates because you didn't get it on in a timely way. And that was basically it.